Our journey begins in the province of Caserta, where we explore a palace that succeeded in rivaling Versailles and continued an Italian tradition of majestic water gardens. Next, we encounter some of Italy's ties to the Second World War, from the seaside town of Anzio to an abbey in the mountains of Cassino. Following the trail of the ancient Appian Way, we then enter Rome for an aerial excursion over its ancient ruins and its awe-inspiring architecture, including the Colosseum, the Forum, the Piazza Navona, and the Palatine Hill. From one of the most ancient cities in the world to the most holy, we visit the sacred grounds of Vatican City. We conclude our adventure in the hills of Tivoli with 2 palatial garden estates. Our excursion to the magnificent Caserta Palace, constructed by Charles III in the mid-18th century, begins by exploring the 4-kilometre-long garden which stretches up the hillside. The park was designed by Caserta architect Luigi Vantivelli and completed by his son Carlo in 1780. Comprised of a system of Baroque water features, the centrepiece is the Fountain of Aeolus, an enormous promenade that spans the entire 120-hectare estate. Adjacent and towards the upper end is the English Garden, designed in 1782 in the English style, a reaction to the formal Italianate gardens of the time. We cover the last segments of the park as it ascends from the Fountain of Venus to its terminus at the great fountain atop of the promenade. An aqueduct was built to bring water to this grotto, from where it then begins its journey down the hillside. The aqueduct is 38 kilometres long and runs through 5 mountains, keeping the waterfalls and other features fully operational. The water first cascades 150 metres into the ornate basin of the Great Fountain. Here we find famous sculptures in the form of the fountains of Diana and, to the left, Actaeon, which depicts the hero transformed into a stag as wolves prepare to tear him to pieces, a penalty for gazing at Diana as she bathed. King Charles III wanted an estate to rival Versailles and Madrid's royal palace. Although he never resided at Caserta, the result of his vision was what the World Heritage Centre deemed the swan song of the spectacular art of the Baroque. Caserta provided assembly for its king, the court and the government. The 1,200-room palace is rectangular, with 4 inner courtyards covering 3,800 square metres. We travel north up the coast to the fishing town of Anzio. Situated on the Lazio coast, the port was a vital landing spot for an attack by the Allied forces in World War II. The plan was to drive through to Rome, just 56 kilometres to the north, to liberate it from German forces. The ensuing battle left Anzio in ruins. However, after the war, much of the town was rebuilt, and in such a way that kept its fishing town character. And set back from the coast in the nearby town of Nettuno is a poignant reminder of the scale of fighting that took place from 1943 to 1944. This is the Sicily-Rome American Cemetery. Rich in art, architecture and landscaping, this vast World War II memorial covers over 30 hectares. Nearly 7,900 fallen American troops are buried here amongst the rows of Roman pines. Most of the casualties were sustained during the liberation of Sicily in 1943, while other soldiers died in the landings of Salerno and Anzio and the heavy fighting northward. We continue on to Cassino, at the southern end of the Lazio region. And it's here we catch the dramatic sight of Monte Cassino Abbey. Since its inception in the 6th century, it has suffered terrible fortune, repeatedly attacked, pillaged, or ruined by natural disaster. During World War II, the German forces used it as a stronghold, blocking access to Rome. American-led air raids almost completely destroyed it in 1944 during the Allied forces' Italian campaign. The abbey, originally built by St. Benedict in 529, was reconstructed after the war in its ancient architectural form, and finally reconsecrated by Pope Paul VI in 1964. With relics from St. Benedict and St. Scholastica, tourists flock to the working monastery to indulge themselves in its historical importance and its attractive architecture. Our journey now takes us to the town of Frascati, where we encounter a magnificent exhibition of papal extravagance, the Villa Aldobrandini. Set facing Rome 20 kilometers away, this dramatic building was an ostentatious display of the church's power and authority. In 1600, Pope Clement VIII, a member of the Aldobrandini family, acquired this site, gifting the property to his nephew, a cardinal. The highly ornate villa and grounds were constructed during the Baroque period, at a time when popes attempted to outdo their predecessors with shows of grandeur, building palaces which reflected their wealth and power. This estate served a ceremonial function for the Aldobrandinis and was not used as a family residence. During the Second World War, there was significant damage to the villa after bombing destroyed over half of the town. Today it remains an architectural treasure for its historical and cultural significance. The Appian Way was once the most strategic road of ancient Rome. It's also the site of the crucifixion of the gladiator Spartacus, whose slave uprising ended along this route. It leads us to the eternal city and capital of the ancient empire, Rome. During his journey to Italy, German novelist Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote that only in Rome is it possible to understand Rome. We're now over the heart of the Italian capital and the river Tiber, winding through the city that has influenced the world politically and socially for 2,500 years. And its importance lives on to this day as the spiritual centre for the world's billion or so Catholics. The splendour of Rome's ancient treasures can be seen almost everywhere, from the imposing Trajan's Column to the temples of the Republican period dating back over 2 millennia. They nestle effortlessly amongst newer landmarks, such as the Victor Emmanuel Monument. One of the best preserved structures is the mighty Pantheon, the former temple to all the gods of ancient Rome. And nearby is the Piazza Navona, arguably Rome's most beautiful square. Once a fortified city, the original walls can still be seen today. They date back to the 3rd century, erected around the 7 hills of Rome to protect against German invaders. 2/3 remain intact and well preserved, since they were used for defence right up until the 19th century. There were 18 grand gates, such as this one, known in ancient times as Porta Appia. Flanked by two semicircular towers, it was later renamed Porta San Sebastiano. The wall incorporated many existing structures, like this Egyptian-style pyramid built in 12 BC as a tomb for Caius Cestius. At the southeastern part of the ancient district are the red brick ruins of the baths of Caracalla. Completed in 217 AD and covering over 11 hectares, the massive rooms were enjoyed by Romans for over 300 years. The complex was able to accommodate up to 1,600 citizens, providing not only bathing, but a library, a gymnasium, galleries, restaurants, and even brothels. Today, it hosts the Rome Opera Company during the summer, having staged the first concert of the Three Tenors in 1990. We arrive in the heart of the city at the imposing and impressive Colosseum, the largest building constructed in the Roman Empire. Despite its decay, it remains a remarkable feat of architecture and engineering. The amphitheatre held 50,000 spectators who assembled for no charge in tiered seating arrangements that reflected the hierarchies within Roman society. Below ground were rooms that contained mechanical devices and cages for wild animals, which could be lifted to appear centre stage. Aiming to increase their popularity, the emperors would stage fights to the death between gladiators and animals, or simply between gladiators themselves. It was made of concrete and stone, yet originally clad in marble, which was later incorporated into the construction of St. Peter's Basilica and other landmark buildings. In the present day, visitors are allowed to view the interior of the arena, and recently, in 2010, the subterranean passageways were opened to the public. The site is still used ceremoniously by the Catholic Church on Good Friday as a starting point for the torchlit procession led by the Pope, known as the Way of the Cross. Although dwarfed in size by its neighbour, the Arch of Constantine is not short of historical significance. One of three remaining imperial triumphal arches, the edifice commemorates Constantine's victory in a 4th century civil war. Ironically, the decorations aren't as well preserved as those from earlier eras, and it's almost a symbol for the eventual fall of the Roman Empire. We shift from the entertainment hub to the centre of Roman public life at the Forum. For over 1,000 years, this rectangular plaza hosted elections, Senate assemblies, and triumphal processions. The complex of ancient ruins includes government buildings, temples, arches, and basilicas, giving the visitors some idea of the Forum's original layout. Perhaps no landmark in the Forum remains as intact and well preserved as the Arch of Septimus Severus. Erected in 203 AD to commemorate the emperor's victory in Parthia, the structure originally had a flight of stairs running through the 12-metre-high centre passage. The arch became property of a church in the Middle Ages, and unlike other monuments such as the Colosseum, its parts were protected and not incorporated into new buildings. According to legend, Rome's founding dates back to 753 BC, when twin brothers Romulus and Remus settled on this site, marking the beginnings of the Roman kingdom. Today, the Palatine Hill is an open-air museum containing ruins of large imperial buildings such as the Palace of Septimus Severus. During the Republican era, the top of the Palatine Hill became the exclusive residential area for the rich and powerful, not least for the amazing vistas over the city. Augustus, Cicero and Mark Antony all resided here. One of Rome's modern landmarks is the 18th century Spanish Steps, connecting a piazza to a 16th century French church. This symmetrical and elegant structure has 12 flights of stairs with a total of 138 steps, and is the widest staircase in Europe. Nearby is the oval-shaped square Piazza Del Popolo. Tourists flocked to see the ancient Egyptian obelisk in the centre, but it was the Porta del Popolo that made an impression upon those arriving in the Renaissance era. The large gate welcomed pilgrims entering the city along the Via Flaminia, which connected Rome to the Adriatic coast. Another example of the opulent palaces built by wealthy families of popes is the Villa Borghese. Situated on the outskirts of Rome at the time of its construction, it was built by a cardinal who was the nephew of Pope Paul V, and to this day showcases the Borghese family's collection of paintings, sculptures, and antiquities. Erected during the late Renaissance in a classical style, the villa became a publicly owned gallery in 1902. Heading towards Vatican City, we stop first at Castel Sant'Angelo, a national museum that once stood as a refuge for popes facing an imminent threat. Originally a mausoleum, the castle was fortified and incorporated into the Aurelian Wall, transforming it into a papal fortress and luxurious residence. Occupying less than half a square kilometre and completely encircled by Rome is Vatican City. It's the world's smallest country and spiritual centre for over 1 billion Catholics worldwide. St. Peter's Basilica was built on Vatican Hill as a shrine to St. Peter, one of the 12 apostles, and considered the first pope. He died as a martyr and was buried on the site in 64 AD. Construction of the present buildings commenced in the early 1500s. The greatest Italian architects of the era spent over 100 years building the new basilica, and it was finally reconsecrated in 1626. Although millions flock to Vatican City each year, it is home to only 800 residents. Arguably, the best panorama of the Eternal City is from the base of the giant lantern that caps the oculus atop the ribbed vault of St. Peter's Basilica. A masterful collaboration between Bramante and Michelangelo, the massive cupola has a diameter of 42 metres and rests on 4 huge pillars, which support a cylindrical drum that features 16 windows. At a height of 136 metres, this crowning piece is the tallest dome in the world. Such a magnificent and imposing structure as St. Peter's would be incomplete without a grandiose esplanade to welcome those taking in its splendour. The Baroque-style piazza was designed by Bernini in the 17th century. The elliptical circus that slopes towards the Egyptian obelisk at its centre is surrounded by massive colonnades, symbolising the church's outstretched arms greeting its communicants. Bernini also sculpted the 140 statues of saints that perch on top of the balustrades of each colonnade. Historian Bannister Fletcher referred to the piazza as the greatest of all atriums, before the greatest of all churches in Christendom. As we prepare to leave Rome, we capture yet another fantastic approach to viewing the city in the form of a hot air balloon, tethered about half a kilometre above the beautiful Borghese Gardens. The vista is our last look at the Italian capital as we continue east into the hills towards Tivoli. we take a slight detour southeast of Rome to a sacred grotto in the hills of Subiaco. Built into the cliff on Monte is this brown-hued stone monastery that enshrines the cave deemed the Sacro Specco, where St. Benedict lived as a hermit for 3 years before organising his first monastic community a few kilometres from here. Most of the monastery's Gothic-style buildings were constructed in the 13th and 14th centuries, hundreds of years after St. Benedict's lifetime. The monastery is still active and open for visitors to pray and explore. And tucked away is an inconspicuous entrance that leads to the holiest place in the sanctuary. This is the portal for the chapel that contains the sacred cave of St. Benedict, where he spent his hermitage in 500 AD. Benedict, along with his twin sister St. Scholastica, resided in the valley for 20 years, founding 13 monasteries and nunneries between them, before moving to Monte Cassino to spend another 2 decades in service. Resting among cypress and olive trees in the ancient town of Tivoli are the ruins of the Villa Adriana, a great complex built as a summer retreat for Emperor Hadrian in the early 2nd century. Excavations began in the 16th century, revealing the remains of some of the finest Roman architecture. The grounds cover a vast area of 120 hectares, which included designs inspired by Hadrian's travels to Greece and Egypt. Like the Poecile, this piazza with a central pool inspired by the Athens landmark Stoa Poecile. In total, there were over 30 buildings, including palaces, baths, a theatre, temples, libraries, and living quarters. The most ambitious creation was Canopus, a sanctuary of the god Serapis along the Nile's delta near Alexandria. Designers crafted a canal over 100 meters long and this artificial grotto called Serapeum. Perhaps Hadrian's favorite refuge was the Maritime Theater, a round pool with an island which contained a small house, an atrium, baths, and a library. Surrounded by columns in a classic Ionic style, the theatre is assumed to be the private studio where Hadrian withdrew to indulge himself in painting and architecture. Our final destination brings us to another palatial estate in a series of extravagant 17th century villas in the hills that surround the Roman Campania. These are the magnificent water gardens of the Villa d'Este in Tivoli. Tourists marvel at the clever irrigation, which feeds the 500 fountains and water displays integrated harmoniously into the natural sloping landscape, which covers an area of 4.5 hectares. Very few gardens can compare to the innovation of the fountains and basins of the Villa d'Este. Perhaps a reason why European gardens from Portugal to Poland would be modelled after the estate's landscaping, such as this wall of water called the 100 Fountains. Cardinal Ippolito d'Este built the villa following a failed bid for the papacy, desiring, in his own words, a garden suitable for one of the wealthiest ecclesiastics of the 16th century. The result were gardens that blended ancient artistry with a modern mannerist style, creating an Italian oasis to be treasured for centuries. A perfect place to end this journey.